Welcome into the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner, and today I'm super excited to have one of my oldest friends in the writing community here on the show with us. Nick Cole is a science fiction and speculative fiction author of I don't even know how to count all the books that you're responsible for at this point, Nick. But I did get to looking back this morning, and you and I on my other podcast, author stories that I've done for over a decade, I realized that you and I recorded a show 11 years ago in a couple of months, and it was episode number 4, which I thought
Wow.
was kind of hilarious. Um, w- we've been through a bunch together over that decade, and it's been a lot of fun. But anyway, all that to say, welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you. You are one of my oldest friends in the business of show that we call writing, as
Right.
Martin Short's character would say. And it's
Right.
funny because I think we all got involved kind of around the 2011 time
Yeah.
frame, this wacky new Amazon thing, and you thought, well, is this going to last or whatever this is? You were racing to keep your head above water and write novels. And
Right.
now you look back, it's into the second decade of it,
Right.
and you can actually see that there were movements, there were patterns, there were the people that you thought, man, I'd like to have that guy or gal's career, and then you kind of had it, and then it kind of rolled over here. It's funny, I have a friend who knew some people in the mob, and he said, how does that work? And he goes, well, in the mob, we all know there's a big ball of money rolling around, and only one person has control of that money. But we all know who that person is, and we're all scheming day and night to get control of the ball of money. But you also know you only get it for a little while, and then someone else gets the ball of money. And that's literally pretty much indie publishing. Like you could go back and say names that were hot,
Oh yeah.
and I wouldn't even know where they are now.
Yeah.
And some people are dead, and some people just exploded. And there's a few people that had the Tom Cruise effect, like just literally bulletproof. I found that those people kind of kept their head down, served their fans, had fun, didn't get caught up in shenanigans, didn't get high on their own supply, and just did the basic work of working the typewriter, the word making machine, the rifle, and just continuing to serve the base, the stories that they wanted to hear. And the moment that person said, well, I'm going to go off and do something new and interesting, is like, usually you can track that's right when the career went downhill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When you and I first met, you were writing for HarperCollins, and you had a book, Soda Pop Soldier, that was a new release and was making a lot of buzz at the time. And then things happened, and you left HarperCollins, and there were a lot of shenanigans around that. But at the time, indie publishing, like you said, was on the rise and becoming kind of this juggernaut. That, but but everyone was really like it almost felt like cheating in a way. We're circumventing the system, that had been in place for long. And but over the past decade or a little longer, it has really come into a mature um, thing where it is as viable, if not more viable, than the traditional publishing behemoth. And to your point about people coming and going, there was a guy that was kind of a rising star in the indie space, and he was a book cover designer. And if I'm not mistaken, he did a cover for you, if I remember. I won't say his name, but anyone who was around indie publishing at the time will know who I'm talking about. But his big desire was to publish with a traditional publisher, and he used indie publishing as kind of that step stool for, or that kind of springboard. And then he attained that goal, and then subsequently disappeared. And it's just funny to see the trajectory of of what people, even though they used the mechanism of indie publishing to get to where they were going, they kind of missed the forest for the trees. Well, and I know you have a million stories like that you've observed over this time.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that guy. I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah,
And I remember him kind of reaching out to me when he was starting to get deals and asking, what do I do here? And I think he had some other issues going on. But yeah, it's right,
probably
gone. Yeah, I remember when he was hot and then just disappeared. And I know people that are
disappeared.
still cranking it out and they were hot. You know,
Yeah,
it's an interesting indie pot. Like we're someone's got to write the book, the early history of indie publishing, just so all these narcissistic writers will read it to find out what everybody said about him. But it's
right.
I definitely believe that the Amazon revolution was one of the biggest revolutions to shake the publishing business, and I know that it was a revolution because the official media won't talk about it. They'll still try to go out there and tell you that trade pub's viable, but it's really not. Now we're in a new, interesting, like you were saying, people can still make it in indie publishing like that. I would say, yeah, but with a caveat. And the caveat is we're now in the age of the micro publishers.
Right.
And so they're kind of like the big names that have sort of climbed to the top, like Dakota Crow, um, uh, A.G. Riddle, lots of people who went ahead and started kind of their own publishing service. Two Chungos named Ansbach and Cole, they did the same thing. Um, you know, they're kind of at that pole position where they can launch books effectively and make money. And now they're starting to take some of the indie people who were struggling and say, okay, we're going to use our machine to get you up there. And in a sense, they're becoming, I think, what Trad Pub should have been, but TradPub, obviously went some different directions. It wanted to go sort of more, definitely more political, definitely more like the things that they wanted to talk about or the voices that they wanted to raise. Basically, without getting unfun, I'm just going to say TradePub went away from the meritocracy of like a good story and a fun time to, well,
Yeah.
we think this is important. And I'm like, I get that. I've done that kind of thing in my life too. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like people told Walt Disney, "Gosh, we wish we had a carousel to ride," and Walt Disney went out and immediately built them a carousel. And that's
Right.
really what Disneyland is. And Disneyland, despite Disney's awful decisions, Disneyland makes money hand over fist because you just gotta throw the hay. The old country saying, you got to throw the hay down where the horses can get it, and
Right.
that's where we are. But it is very interesting, and it's easy to survive like we have survived and look at the people from the past who made some critical flaws or had their moment, and 9 times out of 10 you will agree with me on this, let it immediately go to their head
Yeah.
and look back at their failure and go, ha ha. But the reality is no one, it was the Wild West. It was 1849. It was, Tombstone. Like people were just making it up and trying to figure it out. And you had, big pub willing to turn on the hose for you. And, Amazon at the same time over there making their shady deals, not necessarily shady, but you didn't kind of know, like they were shady in that they didn't tell you everything and they promised you the moon, but really they were experimenting too. And so like you just didn't know what was going to work. In the end, the guy in the gold rush who made all the money was the guy who sold the shovels,
Right.
you know?
Exactly.
And so, that's kind of, like, I don't know what to tell people, but like, you should get into this business because you want to have fun and you want to tell good stories.
Yeah.
But if you think that there's like disabuse yourself of the notion that there's a button that you're going to push and it's going to make money, because you'll find that button. There is that button. I agree with you, except the button changes about every 10 minutes. And the one constant that you can have is like, if you look at the heavy hitters like Dakota Crow, Aileron Kong over in Lit RPG, lots of people, I don't even pay attention anymore. I don't even know who's hot anymore, but Travis Baldry is a great guy and everything like that. Jan Chaney. If you look at the people who are really doing it, they just keep showing up and they
Right.
just keep telling the stories, and they kind of don't get involved in stuff, and they don't. whatever. But it's that's the button. The button is to keep showing up, and that's harder than it sounds, because it's, like, you write one novel that you really think, oh, this is a great milieu, I really want to write in this, and I really want to tell all these stories. And then everybody goes, oh, I love that novel, that's really great, that's really fun, can you write 2 books? And you're like, of course, the money's there, I'll write 2 books. And then they go, can you write 3 books? And you're like, oh, yeah, 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 I kind of only had one story, but here I am on book 5 or 6. you know
Right.
you sure, don't you guys want something else? And they're like, no, we love, like, you have kids, right? How many
Yeah.
times did you get up in the morning, and or in the evening, and you go, I know you guys like macaroni and cheese, and we had macaroni and cheese, Kraft macaroni and cheese yesterday. Uh, who wants a nice baked swordfish fillet? And they look at you and they go, nah, we'll have that macaroni and cheese, short order cook.
Right.
And that's,
Yeah.
you have the right to tell your kids, listen, you need some vegetable and some fish, but you cannot tell that to the fans. They want
Right.
macaroni and cheese. They want what they want, Wings Wednesday, whatever it is, whatever you showed up to the game with, boy, you better be prepared to dig down and do that for quite a while.
Yeah, yeah, and that brings me, that's a perfect transition to, um, when I was trying to think of, like, what's a springboard topic that we could use for this conversation today. I started thinking about, um, I think you and I are close to the same age. I think you're a couple of years older than I am, but
Yeah.
not by much. And I remember as a kid, like in the 70s and 80s, when I really first started getting into science fiction. Of course, there was Star Wars, and there was Star Trek, although that was more kind of my mom and that generation that really kind of got into Star Trek. Um, but I remember inheriting a box of books from my uncle. And it was like golden age sci-fi stuff from the 50s and 60s. And I remember those books being fun, being
Yeah.
like, they were adventure stories, that were about, guys that got into rockets and went somewhere that we had never been before. And I remember the feeling as a young reader that gave me, um, and it was, it was transformative. And then you kind of fast forward to the late 90s, 2000s, and you pick up science fiction, and gosh, is it depressing. And it's just, big brain, all about the problems in society, and we've just taken these problems and set them on another planet, and it's just nihilistic. And one thing that I remember when you and Jason first started talking about this idea for Galaxy's Edge, and you were like, we just want to play with Star Wars action figures in the sandbox and tell fun stories that we always wanted to tell. And that resonated with me, because I think I was the right age for that to resonate with, but it obviously resonated with so many other readers. What do you think about the state of science fiction and how this new, I say new, this other band of science fiction writers that I group you and Jason and Jay and Cheney and Rick Partlow and Jonathan Yanez and so many others that have realized that there's this gaping hole in science fiction and in science fiction readership, and you guys have decided to fill that gap. What do you make of that?
I can speak about those people and everything like that. I kind of stopped paying attention to the general movement of science fiction, especially indie science fiction, when I saw, like, and it was always there from the beginning. I remember I was like first kind of, getting into it, and everybody said, whatever you do, stay away from Kindle boards, because that is a nasty hot mess of people. And I'll
I had
catch little
forgotten about
stories.
Kindle boards.
Yeah, yeah, I remember, and
Yeah.
and I'll catch like where the romance community goes and crucifies one of their own. The community writing books about the evils of the patriarchy burning witches has suddenly decided to hunt down one of their own because she used someone's race or identity improperly or whatever. I always thought that was ironically funny, and it just it there became like a weird nasty tone. And I said, you know what, I'm just an old guy, and I write in a very specific genre now, which is space marine fiction, which is really not that large. And it's not like, like if you get into science fiction writing or writing for the money, and I know you want to do romance, you want to do mystery, all those kinds of things. Great. I'm not going to do that stuff. And I
Right.
just make up my little stories and kind of have a good time. And that was I'd been involved in a project with a bunch of like big time heavy hitter authors, and it kind of fell apart. Indie authors kind of fell apart, and then I got burned alive by HarperCollins for writing something that was purely fun. It was Night of the Living Dead, but with AI.
Right.
And I commented, for one page on a social issue in there. We won't get into that. And they kind of lost their shit over that, and I understand that. And then I was kind of cast off. I was wonderfully canceled, and I said, well, I got to make some money at this writing business because work is hard and this is fun. And I got together with Jason Ansbach, and we said, let's just write these fun stories, and we started doing that, and we got into kind of a group of people who had the same mentality. All those people that you mentioned, and a few others, Richard Fox,
Yeah.
a bunch of others, and we were all just kind of like working together and like spacing out our book launches. And it was really actually like they're real. I will honestly say this: everybody in Space Marine fiction at about that time really had an honest pulling together for you. If you rise, I rise, because I
Hmm.
think we were all unsure about basically wanting to rewrite Aliens over and over and over and over again.
Right.
And we all thought like we kind of hit the lottery, because like we can't believe people just want to read this story over and over and over again. And I think the lit RPG crowd kind of felt the same way, though. Like, I like playing video games. I've written a book about playing video games, and I mean literally playing video games, and I cannot believe people want to read it. And so you're kind of at that moment that you really can't believe it. And thankfully, in that crowd, we were willing to kind of work with each other and stagger the launches and not work against each other. And it just became a lot of fun. The nastiness started to creep in with people like smelling, like they saw Jason and I's success. They're like, oh, I want to do that now too. And then, what did Sartre say? Hell is other people. People kind of began to come in and play dirty tricks and everything like that. But thankfully, Jason and I we talk all the time, and we had these sort of meetings, and we always just told ourselves, like, and there were times that we were offered other carrots to chase, or to get, to go over here. Like, we made a good deal with Amazon Audible, and they said, we'd really like, they lured us with, we'd really like a fantasy series. We really want our version. The big companies all want either a version of Star Wars, or they want a version of Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And they're hoping that you'll be the one that cracks the code. So they threw that carrot in front of us. And thankfully, we took the money and we kept putting it off. And we knew in our hearts, the main part of the story is we took the money. The, main, what we knew in our hearts, though, because we'd seen failures among our contemporaries in Space Marine fiction, where they'd like achieved a level of success, they had this massive audience, and they had in their hearts to, like, I'm going to go write a Lord of the Rings now, and they thought everybody would follow them, and they didn't. And what we said is, well, we know we have all of these people because, Jason built a really good system to stay in touch with the readers. We don't call them fans, we call them readers.
Right.
And they would say, I'm out driving a truck 18 hours a day, and I loved, and a part of our business model was built on the fact that the Disney franchise had purchased Star Wars and walked away from the books. And we kind of
Right.
saw, again, not having fun in this podcast, but we saw, there was obviously some butthurt with that. Well,
Yeah.
most people don't know there's really a lot of butthurt among the readership,
Oh
because
yeah.
they felt like they'd been cast off. And so we said, well, we'll take care of you. We'll tell those stormtrooper stories and everything like that. So we just had fun. We just like, and we would do goofy stuff. We'd like, how close can we get to the line of Star Wars? How can we do this? And like, almost like that unseriousness, but then because Jason is a very serious person, he would like I would like to play with the action figures in the dirt and some lighter fluid. And Jason
Right.
and Jason's like, I would like to play with the action figures behind the plastic case. Isn't that fun? Isn't this nice? You know, are we enjoying just looking at them on the shelf? And so the marriage of that is we took the IP seriously because of Jason's attitude. And then at the same time, we had fun with it. You know, we took our version of Boba Fett and gave him Alzheimer's and made him Obi-Wan Space Kenobi, you know, and we just, you know, like, and it wasn't like, you know, so filed off, but there are people who, like, one of our editors makes a very good claim. He's like, it's hard not to see things that Disney has done and thought that they didn't rip you off
Right.
after the fact. We're like, yeah, we've received that. And we have had dealings with Disney because they tried to shut us down. And we're like, well, actually, we own the IP first of Galaxy's Edge. And so, you know, that there was all that. But we were always just having fun. So when we got to the fantasy thing, we said, you know, we could do pure fantasy, or we could take Space Marine and set it in fantasy. And that became our Forgotten Ruins series, which is, you know, U.S. Army Rangers in basically a Lord of the Rings style world. And the
Which
main
is
thing
one of my favorite things you guys have come up with.
it's fun. It's just
It's
fun.
it's nuts, which I love.
It is nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
best.
And that's the key. Like, I mean, we just and suddenly we found all these guys that, you know, were prior service or GWAT or military enthusiasts and Lord of the Rings fans, and they're like, I can't believe this works, but it's fun, you know. And that's you know, I think the opening line is that is the linguist in the Ranger Detachment who says, I knew I could speak Elvish when I began to dream in it. And then
Right.
it's about, you know, an orc horde overwhelming a 240 Bravo gun team. And so it's just we're just having fun still and playing with action figures in the dirt. And when I see the people who are doing that, I may not always like their ideas, but I look at the base, the readers that are going, or the listeners that are going to see it, and what I see consistently, which is the juxtaposition of what you were talking about with, gosh, science fiction seemed to get unfun. It
Yeah.
seemed to be about these lectures. And again, I will tell you, there were major corporate entities, and they even came to Jason and I when we were doing business with them, that said, why don't you have this kind of character in there? And we said, we don't think the base really cares about that. And this is the far future, and that problem that you want to address, because you're that thing, am I being vague enough? Um, has been addressed 35,000 years from now in the hyperdrive future. They don't really care about that like you care about it.
Right.
So what you're saying is you want to bring today's issues into people's fun. And what we had juxtaposed that is like our the guy that we call our chief trunk monkey. Uh, he basically runs our company for us, Wargate Publishing.
Yeah.
He came to us as a reader, and he has a huge skill set, and he's an incredible writer, Walt Robillard, and he
Yeah.
wrote a great Forgotten Ruin novel. He's done some excellent work in Galaxy's Edge itself. He beta reads everything. He's out there. He's kind of like he's part of the editing team, and you know, now at Wargate Publishing, we're taking submissions, and he's out there telling us what works. But I remember how he came to us. He says, you know, I was sitting in the hospital. My mom was dying of cancer. And if you've
Mm.
ever and I know that you know, most people have had an experience in the hospital with a sick person that
Right.
you love, and you love that person. It's never ending. The days are long. There's you know, the doctors, all these kinds of things, and you just feeling overwhelmed. And he said, I got, like, when she gets some rest, I got an hour to step out of the room and go into the waiting room, and I just needed something to get my mind off what was inevitably happening. And I picked up a Tyrus Rex novel, which is Galaxy's Edge character,
Right.
you know, bounty hunter with Alzheimer's, Obi-Wan Kenobi. And for a minute, I was there. I was at that starport hunting down those contracts. I was in that derelict piece of junk freighter making the jump to light speed. And I wasn't dealing with cancer and the loss of my loved one. And that's when I kind of knew. And like COVID, like, truckers would reach out to us and they're like, I'm trying to keep this country alive, and no one's doing a podcast. And I got these books on tape, and I got to make these deliveries, and you guys are the only ones keeping me, you know, going on these stories. And I began to realize, like, and I'm not going to be Saint Nick here and tell you that I'm better than all the traps that everybody's fallen into about being very passionately caught up in the society about what's going on and the direction that it's going on, both ways, whatever. I've done that in books and things like that. But I began to realize America's stressed out. People are stressed out. They're doing the sick thing. They're doing the trucker thing. They're kind of full up on the game that we're all being offered right now. And what they'd like to do is be Conan. What they'd like to do is be Han Solo.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
and maybe that's a noble thing for me to just distract them for a minute and give them a break, and then drive that truck for another 18 hours. Go into that nursing shift and help out and do those things. I began to realize, like, you know what, and I see it in my writing. I'm like, am I being fun here, or am I being church here? And church is church, and I like church. I go to church, and I think church is great. But if you think people want to be entertained at church, go watch the latest, series that you like on Netflix. They lure you in. Oh, it's 17th century Welshman, and he's a rogue, and he's having fun, and he has all these. Now he's got a social issue from modern times. And you're like,
Right.
can't we just stab people and shoot them?
Right.
Like it works all the ways. Oh, look, cowboy people. Oh, now they're talking about this. And you're like,
Right. Yeah.
and that's So what I found when I look at the people who are successful, including myself and Jason, is that if you just have fun and you remember that people need a little break and they want to play Han Solo or whatever it is, that's your job there. That's your job. Your job is to build the carousel.
And sometimes that's you're doing more heavy lifting than you realize. That's what enough writers don't realize, is that they're being a little too on the nose with what they think their job is in the world, and sometimes it's just not that serious.
No,
in actuality it is, but it just doesn't appear that way.
Well, it's serious in the way that the writer doesn't understand that it is serious.
Right.
A lot of the writers are using it to, big man syndrome. We saw that in people you and I both know, and suddenly, wanted to become a supermodel, I guess. I don't know. Or, and you do
with
get
bag of Doritos.
And many other people, or it was like all the insecurity of whatever their dad had said to them, or why the homecoming cheerleader didn't date them or whatever was made false because someone wrote and said, "Gosh, I love your book. You mean so much to me. I'm dying of cancer. I'm lonely." And they just, like I was saying, you got high on your own supply. And it's like, it's not, they're not thinking about you when they're not reading your books, that they're kind enough to dash off an email to you. But they're not, there was a preacher I liked, and he died a few years ago. And he was a big time apologist. And he said, you've got to resist the temptation of bigness. And it really is, like, when we get into Tolkien, it's what Tolkien was talking about, the Lord of the Rings, like that ring can really, that letter, that email, that #1 ranking, all those things can convince you that now is your moment to ascend to the stage and talk about how bad the other side is. I've done that, and they do it on the other side, and we all do it. And it's like, but that's not, like, they just want to know what a light machine gun with an infantry platoon will do to a raging troll. They think that's fun. What happens if you shoot a grenade at a giant or a Carl G at a dragon? They kind of, and you're like, before I shot the Carl G at the dragon, I wanted them to know that my politics were right. And it's like, everybody is so full up with that right now, and it's valid. I get it. You're all right. It's all great. And everything like that. But perhaps there's something, mayonnaise is $8 a jar.
Right.
Nothing tastes like it did. Fritos don't taste like they do. There's
you live in California, it's even worse.
There's not a damn good movie in the movie theaters. Well, everybody liked Wolverine and Deadpool, but that was an anomaly. It's just the going to the arcade or going to have fun, like it's just getting harder and harder and harder. And I would just tell everybody right now, like, man, books on Amazon that you can download or listen to or whatever, like, you don't understand what target rich environment you have right now if you're just willing to have some goofy ass fun, like Jan Chaney's book, Backyard Starship,
Yeah.
like Travis Ballery's Lattes and Legends, like Galaxy's Edge. Just, take the goofiest idea that you had when you were 8 years old. Think of Elon Musk. He drew a truck when he was 8 years old and made it a Cybertruck. Or like the astronaut who's in space who has a degree in rocketry and dinosaurs. Totally 8-year-old dreams. Like,
Right.
go do these things. And because, like, what happened is, in the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, and early on, kind of with indie publishing, it's so wonderful that big media and everything and big publishing kind of chose the path that they went, which is, now is our moment to elevate. And this was literally their verbiage: the voices we want to elevate. And you're like, great, I'm not that person because I'm different. I'm an old man, you know. So no one cares what I think. You guys want a young, blue-haired, mighty girl who's going to tell ninja kicking stories, demo explosive.
Oh, we lost Nick. Let's see. Well, give him a second and see if he is able to log back in. Hang on, everybody. I just sent Nick a message and gonna see if we can get him back. Hang tight just a second. Hang in there with us just a second, guys. We're gonna see if we can get Nick back. Nick, are you back?
Are you there?
Nick, I'm here. Are you back?
Sorry, my phone was sitting on the dashboard and it overheated.
Oh no.
You can cut it, right?
Oh yeah. We'll fix it in post. And then what you're supposed
I
to say?
love that. I love fixing things in post. Okay, so fix it. I think I remember where I was dropping in, but just like, basically, Big Pub opted out of, just to put it very bluntly, having fun.
Yeah.
And people don't understand what a huge gold mine that is to an indie writer with no hose to turn on. And when I mean hose, I mean like if you've ever had Amazon back a book, and I have, they did the Savage Wars. Any kind of major corporate entity has some serious dollars, and especially Amazon, because it's their system, to really turn on the hose of your book and get it out there. And you really do see significant sales. So when they kind of opted out of fun, what happened is, if you were writing fun, you didn't have to compete with them for the advertising dollars. And so they went off and did what they were going to do, and you did what you were going to do. And I think, in a certain way, Galaxy's Edge has really profited because big media walked away from just having a good time with a Star Wars style story, and instead kind of killed the audience. And then, a lot of our contemporaries, like, oh, I want to write it, but I want to jam this thing in and give a sermon and everything like that. And we're like, we're just going to we're gonna make a droid called Lifty, and he survives every battle, and it's funny,
Right.
and people, like we're still serious about it and everything like that, but we're gonna make teenage 12-year-old boy jokes about stormtroopers, under in firefights and things like that, and so what I say to the indies is like, you've never been in a more target rich environment if you're willing to just go ahead and have fun with your stories, get rid of, all the side stuff and the narratives and the agendas and all these kinds of things, because the big media, they're not competing with you in sort of like, what do you mean by fun story, Nick? I mean, like any kind of movie from the 80s as a book, you know,
Right.
but without kind of like people know what I'm talking about. Just
Yeah.
have fun, tell the story. Don't feel this need to make a character this way because it's in the zeitgeist or hot or whatever. Just truthfully tell the story and have a good time with it. And yeah, I think you'll get these tone police that'll kind of come along, but like they're literally an immeasurable portion of the audience to the people that are like driving a truck, doing a nursing shift, doing whatever, and working on some hobbies at home and want to listen to books. And so, like, it's a really great time because you don't have to compete against Simon and Schuster, some giant New York publishing entity who's like, "Hey, we've heard that Bigfoot Jedi is a great genre, and we hired Timothy Zahn to write us a Bigfoot Jedi novel. It's going to be on every end cap in every supermarket, in all the airports." What's your little Bigfoot Jedi novel? That you're on Amazon, like spending like $100 in advertising on.
Right.
Like you can't compete against them. Well, they've opted out of those kind of stories. So literally, there's a certain amount of people I guarantee that want to read a novel where a Bigfoot is a Jedi. Now you can't call it a Jedi, you call it a space wizard, but it's a
Right.
Bigfoot, and I guarantee you, the Amazon knows that there's like, man, there's 65,000 weirdos in our market who would crave this story
Oh
because they
yeah.
like Jedi stories and they like Bigfoot stories, and this seems, we could sell this book to them, and you're not competing against any major media entity because they're busy saying what you really need is another this identity politic in this setting, and everybody's like, yeah, but that's been kind of done to death. Like, do you have anything else? And so, like, it's it's funny to say, but like, you can have fun writing and no one's competing with you, and so it's almost like easy money.
Yeah. When when you and Jason started, when you first had the idea for Galaxy's Edge, and you decided that you were going to tackle this a little bit. I remember we did a show like 6 years ago, whatever it was, where you guys had the idea for this, and you started doing it a little differently. You started gathering your audience before you published the first book, which I found really intriguing, because you started building a readership, um, and had kind of your own infrastructure in place before bringing the books out. And of course, Amazon, you took advantage of everything that you guys had learned about IndiePub and publishing on Amazon and all of that. But you didn't put all of your eggs in the Amazon basket. You built your own back end and your own infrastructure. That obviously has served you well in the remaining years, in the intervening years. How has that? Because we all see the the fluxes in Amazon and the way the algorithm has changed now, and the way that KU operates and the way it pays this and that. That there's always changes and fluxes in the system, but you guys have been able to maintain a steady readership and a steady outreach and communication with your readers through that. Could you talk a little bit about what you guys built that has allowed you
Oh,
to
for
kind
sure.
of weather the storms?
For sure, definitely. Like, I think the first thing is, you want to define terms and not, if anybody got turned off by, oh my gosh, I'm getting a defined terms lecture. Hold on to your butts. I'm going to bore you even more. But basically, like, the readers are customers. And it's important to remember that. They're not your fans. They're not your psycho fans. They're not a lot of the other slurs that I've heard writers make about readers. But at the end of the day, they are as much a customer as someone walking into In-N-Out Burger this afternoon for a double double, animal style, add chilies, 3 types of onions, toast on the bun. Like they want that burger that way, and you're there to make burgers, so you should make them happy. So they are a
Right.
customer. Now, in a perfect world, the most perfect, you have to, like defining terms, the most perfect relationship is the customer walks up to you, asks for something that you have, gives you money, you take that money and keep that money, and you give them the thing that they have. And everybody's like, well, duh, that's easy. Right. Well, it's not. It's not. Because you have these third party corporate entities that are willing to do the heavy lifting of providing a platform and a marketing service in exchange for being in complete control of that customer and deciding how much money and access you get to that customer. And initially, in the gold rush mentality of Amazon, you're willing to make that trade. Like, okay, Amazon's going to make the platform, and they're the only circus in town, and like, so. But then when you realize when Amazon decides we're going to change the algorithm and it totally screws all your work, or we're going to elevate certain voices, and you're not one. Well, they market to your customers other people's books, but you did
Right.
the heavy lifting of the writing. And believe me, they can do that. I've had people go, oh, I didn't realize you wrote a book 2 or 3 in the series. I was busy off reading what Amazon was, pointing the hose at. It's a very powerful weapon. And we have to be honest about these things. That is the way that it is, because you're not going to build an Amazon, but you can do things to attempt to always, and what you can do is just understand and know what I just said. The purest form of this relationship and the best one for you as a writer, in which is one in which they directly give you money and you give them an ebook form, an ebook file, or you can even do a hard copy, or you could do an Audible thing. But like, and that's not always easy to accomplish, but it's the purest form that you should strive to do. Now, Jason was brilliant. What Jason said was, we'll build a subscription model right off the bat. And so they'll still get the book on Amazon and everything like that. But what we'll do is we'll exchange them sample chapters, fun art, planning sessions between you and I, insider stuff. And the true believers and the fans will really dig that. And they'll probably still buy the book on Amazon. I'm like, I don't know about that, Jason. And you know what? Lo and behold, it totally worked. It totally
Yeah.
right. There's a certain percentage of people who want inside access. They want to be part. Not everybody wants it. But the interesting thing about those, what we call true believers, is they're the ones that really take a lot of the sort of, like, Christ and the disciples. They're the ones that really want to go out and spread the word because they're so excited about this. And so literally we've had stories come back to us, like one special forces team with another SEAL team sitting on a helicopter, looks over and sees some swag from Galaxy's Edge and says, you read those books? And they're like, yeah. And they're like, hey, the whole team reads these books, you know, and they're out repping. Or people are like, oh, I bought 6 copies for everybody in my platoon because I wanted everybody to get into this book, so we'd all have something to talk about. So your true believers are the ones that buy the swag, buy the merch, street team out on the street telling people about their new religion, your book. And so the cool thing is, it's not everybody, but it's somebody. And if you kind of make this little subscription service where they pay a little bit extra, but you really do give them content that no one has. And I would, defining terms again, I would say exclusivity. And if you look in the world of fashion, this happens a lot. Like the people who really buy like Ralph Lauren or fashion bloggers or whatever, they go and they find the people who really promote their product. And they're like, hey, we created a cool leather bomber jacket and we only made 10 of them. Would you like to
Right.
buy it? And the person's like, yes. And people go, oh, that's a beautiful jacket. I actually have one of those from a clothing designer that I really like, which is Ralph Lauren, Double RL. I bought a really bitchin' moto jacket. It's very expensive. And every time I wear it, people go, that is a great jacket. I go, oh, it's this brand, these people, and everything like that. And there's me doing the heavy lifting for Ralph Lauren, who doesn't
Right.
need me to do it. But imagine if you could get that with writing. And that's kind of what we did with Galaxy's Edge. We began to like offer certain exclusive experiences. Come to Vegas with Nick and Jason. We're going to shoot machine guns. We're going to play D&D. We're going to play the Forgotten role-playing game. We're going to eat Brazilian meat until we have meat sweats. And you can talk about anything that you want with us. And we did that. And we've had other things too. And there's a private Galaxy's Edge event up in Washington and stuff like that, and Disneyland and things like that. So we do it, or we get together, or like I get together and play video games almost like every Friday night with just the group. You know, not anybody showing up, or sometimes we, someone shows up and we meet him in the game, and then they go, oh, what are you guys all about? Oh, we're about Galaxy's Edge, and we say goofy things, and they're like, I'm in, I want to join the cult, because everything is a cult. And you just have to realize, like, what if I make my own little cult based around this really goofy Bigfoot Jedi story that I want to tell that no trade publisher would ever publish? But I always thought Bigfoots would be great Jedi, or
Right.
whatever your goofy ass idea is, and you have them, and just stop trying to write what's successful and what everybody else is writing, and go back to what I originally talked about at the beginning of the podcast. Write that thing that's really great, because when they want book 2 and book 3 and I think Galaxy's Edge is up to book 29, and Forgotten Ruin is up to book 9, and there are other books and everything like that. Like that, you're still like, because Galaxy's Edge is basically G.I. Joe meets Star Wars. We haven't run out of ideas because we both liked G.I. Joe and Star Wars,
Right.
and we just found our sweet spot. And so you build the subscription model, and you have that, and we're even taking some new steps now with a new deal that we're making with Audible again, and a bigger deal this time. And we're saying we're doubling down harder on the desire to have that direct exchange with the reader, which is like, you give us money, we will give you goods and prizes. And we just see that as the way, because time and time and time again, when a third party gets involved, you get in sort of middle managers who have their ideas about what your IP should be. They're not writing it, but they just think, like, I go back to this one story that happened in Hollywood. And if you talk to, or you listen to a lot of directors, like everybody from Kevin Smith to Quentin Tarantino, they tell you that they talked to the same producer. And this producer went around Hollywood and listened to everybody's pitch from the Wild West to Superman. And he listened to the whole pitch, and he's like, I'm willing to produce this, but
Giant spiders.
there you go. It
Yeah.
has to have a giant spider. And no one could figure this guy out.
Yeah.
And he would just, but like, it's the same thing when you deal with the bigger corporate entities, because they can throw money at you, and you get this mid-level manager in there, and they're kind of the gatekeeper, and they go, wouldn't it be great if you had my giant spider in there, quote unquote? And you're like, I don't think my base wants a giant spider, but they
And
got
didn't
that
that
money and they're dangling that carrot,
same producer guy go on to do Wild Wild West with
and he got the
Will
giant
Smith,
spider in.
and he got
And
the
guess what?
giant spider?
It was a bomb,
That's
And I
that's
love
one of my
Wild Wild
favorites.
West. Big
Yeah.
Ross Martin fan. I like
Yeah.
Robert Conrad. Ross Martin guy personally.
Yeah.
But it's, I tell that story to say that whatever you're writing, I really want you to know, like, this is like to both you and I right now personally in this conversation, and to everybody listening, there are people that
Nick, I lost you. Are you there?
all the debt.
Yep.
Oh, hold on. Are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. What I'll say it, we can cut it again.
Okay.
The world, what I really want, you and I in this conversation, because we both as writers need to hear this every day. It's like the all glory is fleeting, slave in the chariot as the Roman Caesar enters Rome. You've got to hear this every day. And it's that no matter what your idea is, no matter how goofy it is, and everybody's told you it's dumb or stupid, or the inner monologue of the voices, the truth of it is there's 8 million people on this planet, and Amazon's got most of the purchasing data on them and knows exactly what they want to read. And whether it's, 5 million people or 10,000 people, you can make a living on the amount of people that want to read your goofy ass idea. And so if you do the will to prepare, which is build that interface where on some level, whether it's a good website, a platform, or a subscription service, or even Patreon. Again, you're inviting another third party. Like Jason initially created our very own subscription service without anybody, without Patreon, without any of these things. We don't use that. We just build our own service,
Yeah.
Stripe, PenPal, make the website, do all the hassle of IT and the culling of the list. And Jason, that's a large portion of Jason's life. But at the end of the day, we can directly send that person an email, as long as Gmail's not involved, an email to them that says, hey, our goofy idea number 30 just launched. And they're like, I love goofy idea. You're telling me there's 30 books in that? Oh, great. And we don't have to rely on Amazon to say, we're going to promote our goofy idea number 1 and see if it works based on your, the customers showing up for you. And the truth is they all the third party corporate entities really do that. And sometimes you get in this guy who wants his giant spider and someone else has written his giant spider. And so he's like, today I'm going to push the audience that way. And you're like, yeah, but I wrote 30 of these. Yeah. We want to go a new direction. It's like, well, you're SOL. So,
Right.
whatever you're starting, the biggest thing that, the takeaway from the conversation I could give you is have fun. Your idea totally has merit. No, it may not be Harry Potter. It may not be Star Wars, but I'll tell you what, you can make a living on 10,000 fans, 10,000 readers. Definitely you can make a living on that if you're willing to show up every month and write a 70,000 word book to 10,000 people willing to buy it at $4.99. Do the math. You can make a living on that.
Yeah.
Now you're gonna have to do some work to get there, but if you take the time to prepare the battle space so that you are as close as you can get, like do that 6 degrees of separation, Kevin Bacon, with your potential reader and say, here's me writing a story at this word processor. Here's this chungo out here trying to find my story. Who is between me and them? Amazon, Gmail, this pay service, this Twitter, Facebook. How do I narrow that gap? How do I get it down to as close as it can possibly be? Where I go, Steve, here's goofy idea number 30. Great. Why am I meeting you at a gas station? Shut up and don't ask questions. Give me the Wild Wings Wednesday $20 gift card. Thank you. I love you. Exchange made. Is there anything better than that? Like if I could do
There's
that
not.
right now, I would do that. But I've had to scale. But Amazon didn't get in the way, Gmail didn't get in the way, social media company didn't get in the way. And you live in an age when sometimes if you don't say the code, even if you're on that side and you don't say the code that they want to hear, they just turn you off. They turn off your pay system. They turn off your social media. Not being unfun. I'm just saying those are the realities. So
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful because it teaches us, it returns us to, like we're samurai, to the purity of the draw of the blade from the scabbard and the one chance to cut some guy's head off with one stroke. And that's a sale. And so
Right.
it just reminds us, like, be as close to that customer as you possibly can. Play games with them. Have their email. I get wedding invitations. I always tell myself when I get them, I'm going to make an effort to go. And then I remember I don't like going outside the house. But I've attended Zoom wedding meetings, and I may just go to a wedding meeting. I may just grow a pair and leave the front door. I go down to the beach a lot, stuff like that. But like if you can have that relationship where a reader is willing to invite you to their wedding or out to their fishing cabin, you know what? I've gone to, like, I had a reader go like, hey, I'm renting a cabin in Monterey. Want to come? And I thought, why not? And I went, and it was wild, and I had a great time, and they turned out to be a great friend. and it was a lot of fun. Like you Amazon will never allow you to have that relationship. In a perfect world, they don't want you to have a platform. They don't want you to have an email relationship. And then you go over to Facebook and they kind of don't want you to talk to them too, because they're busy showing you like all these ads for this goofy ass t-shirt or this wacky product. And you're
Right.
like, so the battle, is one, to have fun, and then two, have that relationship with that reader where literally we can exchange goods and services at the gas station, like a
Right.
couple of lot lizards.
Right. Uh, Galaxy's Edge season 3 recently launched. What's going on in this new season, and what can we expect?
Well, in the new season, we're basically bringing the main storyline to a close, um, because we've gotten 30 books in that, and we feel that that's, you know, all the stories have been told faithfully without, you know, pulling any cons. And now we want to, and there are other like series. There's the Savage War series, there's the
Right.
Contracts of Termination, the Order of the Century. There's all these other side series that take place over the 2,000-year life of the Galaxy's Edge series. And what we're going to do now is start, what we said in house, and I have to be coy here or clever, because everything that Jason and I do gets stolen. If we use a certain artist, it gets ripped off. If we use a voice narrator, it gets ripped off. If we, make it like, a lot of people watch us because we're successful. So basically, what we would say is all the work that we've done in Galaxy's Edge, 4 or 5 different series, 30 books, has been done to now tell what we've always wanted to tell, which is our version of Star Wars. Even though we would have told you we've been telling our version of Star Wars, now we're going to really tell Star Wars. And so it's kind of a reset, and that's going to be happening with a new company that wants to take over the audio rights. And so we're doing some branding, we're doing some development there. The biggest thing though that we decided to do is we decided to take what we do, which is, publish fun indie fiction, and we decided to enter the micro publisher game. So we started our own publisher, which is Wargate Books, and we began to develop authors that we were working with in Galaxy's Edge. So Doc Spears, Peter Nealon, Blaine Pardoe, Walt Robillard, and then we began to publish other people like Mark Sibley, and a few others who were beginning to develop good followings within their space. And so basically, we turned into a small publisher. We're also doing some. We're doing a book on the Second Amendment with a lawyer and an ex-CIA agent. We're doing a biography of a U.S. Army Ranger who's very famous, Max Mullen. We moved into this basic sphere of, do you like the military in all its different forms, from military fiction and fantasy to military biography to sort of real present day Tom Clancy type stuff? Do you like all that? Well, we're doing that now, and we're developing a subscription method for that, um, so that people who really want the inside access can have that. Then we're doing the books and hardcover and everything like that. So the big thing that we decided to do was become a micro publisher. And then that kind of adjusted some of Jason and I's work and what we're doing. We have 2 IPs, Forgotten Ruin and Galaxy's Edge. We're going to be launching a new IP. Can't say anything about that. Then both Jason and I have other IPs that we do either around Wargate Books, or Jason works with J.N. Chaney, and they have 2 or 3 series that they're doing. They have a new series that sounds really exciting they've been telling me about. And basically just doing the old synergy, working together, and realizing that in the space of just having fun, in the space of just telling those old golden age tales like you were talking about, not really that, the fun aspect of that, but not, like the golden age aspect,
Yeah.
but more like the 80s movie version of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we've just decided to do that. And the wonderful thing is, and I think it's changing. I will say this, I think it's changing. We just had a conversation with a major corporate entity, and they kind of saw what we were doing. And we said, we literally fed their own words back to them. And they said, yeah, we're kind of not doing that anymore. Everybody just wants to have fun. And I was like, oh, now they're the Titanic. It's going to take a
Right.
long time for them to turn, and they have some stuff to overcome. But they're seeing that fun works. And
Oh
so they're
yeah.
changing. And so, we're just doing that. We're just telling the goofiest tales that we can tell that people like want to have fun. And, and you'll always get people that jump on there and say, you're doing it wrong, or you're not doing it right enough, or right think enough, or whatever. We're like, okay, fine. Um, one big thing I would tell every author, and I kind of learned this from a veteran sci-fi author, Karen Travis. I think you've interviewed her, right?
Mm.
She wrote for
Yes.
Doubleday, Star Wars books, and really wonderful British lady. And she really talked about how when she was writing the Star Wars books, they kind of got manipulated by what really turned out to be 11 IP addresses. And the editors thought that everybody wanted these stories to go a certain way. And when one of the authors who had an IT background kind of dug around, they said, all these emails you're getting aren't true. They're just coming
Right.
from 11 IP addresses. And so in your calculations, it's a really stunning thing for a writer to get an email from somebody. And sometimes they'll say, wouldn't it be great if you had this story? And you should listen to that. And sometimes it's valid and legitimate. But the more successful you get, the more likely you are going to have somebody who either might work for a big corporate entity or might just really want you to tell their Star Wars, to attempt to manipulate you through making it seem like this is the way something should be. The reality is, and this is the best metric I can give anybody, look at your reviews on Amazon and understand that that is probably only 10% of the people reading your book. So if you have like Galaxy's Edge has like 5,000 reviews on Audible for no 13,000 for, not that I look, for Legionnaire, you know, you know, that's probably only about, probably even less than 10% of, I know the
Sure.
sales.
Yeah.
That's probably less than 10% of that. And you see, like, generally it's got more 5 stars, more 4 stars, but we as normal human beings are gravitate towards those 1 and 2 star critical reviews
Yeah.
because we hate ourselves and we love the people who hate us too. you know and you have to just remember, like, that's literally statistically a small slice of the actual audience. The most of the audience reads your book and enjoys it and does nothing. They don't leave a review. They may not even tell anybody, but who cares? They bought the book, but
Yeah.
you just have to keep that perspective in mind. And, like, you really don't have the whole picture. And the best thing that you can keep doing is just going back to that original touchstone of the fun that you were having in jumping to light speed with a giant hairy Bigfoot Jedi. I guess you could call it a Wookiee, but then Lucas would, come in with helicopters over your house and parachute through your roof and shoot your dog and say, you can't call it a Wookiee. So call it a bookie. I don't know,
You're
or a Mookie. I don't know, whatever, but have fun.
yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Is the Wanted the newest Galaxy's Edge release?
It, it sure is, and we're having a blast with it.
Yeah.
And it's really fun to kind of like bring all of these things not to a close, but to a new beginning.
Yeah.
And it's, the Galaxy's Edge series is really Star Wars through, it's the battle for the stormtrooper soul. As what, Star Wars is the battle for the Jedi soul.
Right.
Our Galaxy's Edge is the battle for the stormtrooper soul. And what we found is, like, there was a lot of guys who served in the GWAT who ended up feeling like that stormtrooper, and so that story really resonated for them. And so that was our vein of gold. And whether we liked it or not, we did like it. And so we just decided to sit down and mine it and have fun and stay there. And so we would say all the work we've done in that is to begin what we think is our biggest effort, that people could literally just read that and never having read Galaxy's Edge be fine. Or they could go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I like this story. And then, the faithful, the insiders will come along and say, did you know that it's all rooted in this previous series? you know, and so that could be fun too. Whatever it is, however you choose to do it, there are, going back to those guys and ladies that we were talking about. Um, you can make some missteps, uh, but 9 times out of 10, in being an indie writer, the missteps that you make that kill you as an indie writer are usually your own making. You are your own worst enemy. You know what? I found this app on the phone, and it shows you exactly who your own worst enemy is. It's called the camera, and you can just bring it up and reverse the image, and there he is. Oh my gosh, that's the guy who's out to get me. But if you resist that temptation to bigness, and you
Yeah.
resist that temptation to preach a sermon, and you just have fun, and you make sure that your relationship is as close as it possibly can get, you know, Trains, Planes, and Automobiles, John Candy, and Steve Martin in the bed. Those aren't killers. Close. Pillows. Close. You know, you will probably make a living at this. Did I
Yeah.
promise you that you'll be J.K. Rowling? No. But I guarantee you, you do this and you do it for about 2 to 5 years, you can probably make a living at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sage advice. Nick, this has been such a fun time getting to catch up. We're going to put links to all of your stuff in the show notes to make it easy for folks to find you. What's the best place online if someone is just discovering you and wants to dig into all that you've got going on? What's the good kind of central hub to jump off of?
I would go, to learn about the Galaxy's Edge, which is, really where Jason and I like reveal ourselves and get it. I think you get like I think Forgotten Ruins free over there, book one, and you get a free audiobook or a free ebook, or you could just take both, because we own that series. We didn't produce that with anybody, so we're able to do like a wacky marketing thing like that. Go over to Audible and check out Tin Man or Galaxy's Edge 1 over there, and just get into that. If you want to, if you like this sort of bizarre person that I am, and it's pretty tame on X, um, then go over there. Let's see how that works out for you. That leads to some darker avenues of who I kind of am, but I just tell people like, well, buy the ticket and take the ride. But it's like
Right.
it's like when Eddie Murphy went to visit Michael Jackson, and Bubbles the chimp was behind the cage, and Eddie wanted to play with the chimp, and Michael's like, I don't know, Bubbles isn't so friendly anymore. You can find my Bubbles personality over at X through a certain link, and then you can realize what a monster I am. But generally, I
Touche.
just try to keep it light and fun and happy and everything like that. But you know, underneath every writer is a Bubbles the chimp. Not so happy-go-lucky anymore, willing to tear your face off.
And I don't know of a better place to end that than with Nick Bubbles Cole. Nick, always a pleasure to get to hang out. Thanks so much for taking time to come on the show.
Thank you, brother. I love you.
I love you too.